accounted and accountable, then the law will work. If the expenditure is illegitimate and unaccounted and unaccountable, no law will work. It's as simple as that. And there's an incentive now to not operate that. And even the provisions of the existing law, like for instance, free television time. Dr. Bhaskar talked about the perversions of democracy in the United States and the huge television expenditure. And Barack Obama spent millions of dollars in 1/2 hour just 48 hours ago to go to the nation. Now in India, the lawmakers have taken care of that by guaranteeing free airtime in public and private channels for recognized political parties. What happened? The rules have not been changed in order to make this simple rule operational, even when the parties have something to gain. It's an amazing development. Even after the law was enacted in 2003, we still have not framed the rules, and therefore the law is inoperative to this extent. India is one of the few countries that gives 100% tax exemption to the donors of political parties. And yet, 95% of the funds to political parties or to elections is unaccounted because nobody finds it convenient. Because the expenditure is not legitimate. And that's not what wins elections. This is all for the theoreticians and for the reformers and for the nice guys in the country, not for real politics. Therefore, we must go deeper into these issues of money and the distortions of money, power and politics, resulting in the behavior in Parliament that's merely an external symptom. Deep inside there's cancer. This headache will not be solved by merely cutting off the head or thinking of some Saridon or some analgesic. The third, of course, is freebies. It's not merely that I give money during elections. Increasingly, the members of legislature and the parties in power and opposition, they have realized that the state money itself is there as an inducement for the vote. Even if you take away a big part of that cake for private gain, you can still give a significant part for 2 rupees rice, free electricity, free color television. Which other democracy sees a color television being given free and being accepted as the norm? It's not even part of the constitutional duties of a government. At least rice, you can claim that there is a reason why the poor should be supported, at least for the time being, though it's not a solution to poverty. But color television, and yet the system did not have the gumption to stand up and say, Mr. Karunanidhi, distributing television is no part of the state. The Election Commission has no guts, and I don't know what the Supreme Court is going to do. I hope the Supreme Court will say, at least this is a corrupt electoral practice, because we're not going to go too far. Tomorrow I'm waiting for a day when a party will say, I will distribute 5 bottles of liquor every month to your family if only my party is elected to office. Why not? How is it different from a color television? Therefore, the freebies. Now, how do we address these issues? Some people mention the question of incentives, Mr. Speaker. Dr. Shashi Tharoor talked about the larger systemic issue, and I agree with him that there is an imperative need for clearer separation of powers. But I am much more practical than Dr. Tharoor. I know it will not happen for quite some time, and I also know that at the national level, there probably are very sound reasons why it cannot happen. North-South, Hindu-Muslim, Hindi, non-Hindi. We have so many fractures and divisions in a very complex and diverse society, why at the national level probably the country cannot invest that kind of authority in one functionary, though that functionary actually is weaker than an elected prime minister who more or less controls both the parliament and the executive branch of government. But these niceties are not adequately understood, therefore there are fears. I understand. But there are other elegant solutions to change the incentives. And the good news, I believe, is, and that's where my optimism comes from. Dr. Brahmachari talked about his optimism. My optimism is not irrational. I believe there are reasons why we must be optimistic. Good things will happen, big changes will happen, not because they are moral and they are right. Rarely does it happen so in politics. Good changes will happen when the politicians in office realize that there is a vested interest in such change, and incidentally there is a benefit to the nation. And I believe there is now such a concomitance of circumstances coming today in the country in the next few years. The national parties are losing out very badly in our perverse electoral system. Today, in the 6 largest states of India, UP, Bihar, Maharashtra, Andhra Pradesh, West Bengal and Tamil Nadu, not necessarily in that order, except in Andhra Pradesh, Congress party is a dominant player. In no other state is any of the 2 leading national parties major players. They're either non-existent virtually politically, or they're playing second fiddle to their local partners. It's an amazing development which is somehow ignored by all of us, because The parliament seems to be unaffected because of alliances and coalitions, and therefore we think this is not an unnatural development. Increasingly, as the national parties are coming below a certain threshold of vote, their seat share is falling well below their vote share. And once people realize that their vote does not translate into electoral presence, representative election, automatically that party dries up. Then you have a Hobson's choice. If you don't have an alliance with a local partner, you are zero in parliament from that state. If you have an alliance with a local partner, you are zero in the state because you don't contest in many parts of the state, and if you don't contest in politics, you don't exist. There is an extraordinarily cruel fate now hanging down the necks of the leading parties, and that's what happened in these states. Increasingly, it's happening in many other states. Therefore, the major parties, the national parties, have now a vested interest in looking at a fundamental change, not for the country, but for their own sake. And the country incidentally benefits. India is one of the handful of countries with a current electoral system. By a quirk of it, Dr. Tharoor talked about margarine versus butter when Attlee offered the presidential executive system, the clear separation of powers. But come to the first past the post system. It's an unnatural system which is accepted only by Britain and its former colonies and no other country on earth. Somehow we in India think that's the only normal political system operative in the world. Right now there are only 8 countries in the world that operate that. Even Britain's former colonies have rejected it increasingly. New Zealand has switched over to a proportionate system. Australia has a very sophisticated alternative voting system. And wonder of all wonders, Britain is giving up its own first past the post system. In Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, in the regional parliaments, Britain has a proportionate system. It has given up its first past the post system. In London City, 20% of Britain, the mayor is elected by a direct election. He is a presidential executive. Britain is giving it up. The British Parliament is the last institution in Britain that still sticks to this first past the post system. And Indians are the last living Englishmen, as somebody said long ago. And we stick to it like limpets. We don't realize that this is a totally unnatural thing. And this is hurt in the country because the marginal vote is all important today. It does not matter how honest you are, how capable you are, if the people's perception is that you are not likely to win, even if you are popular otherwise, you will not get the vote. It does not matter if you get 40% of the vote or even 48% of the vote. It's the marginal vote of a few thousand that will make or break your political fate. And therefore politicians are responding to that desperate choice. It's not because they're cruel or crooked. It's easy for us to say all these politicians are crooked. It's a ridiculous notion. Politicians can be honorable, politicians can be ugly also. They have not taken a vow to destroy India. They have only taken a vow to do whatever it takes to come to power. And that's the function of politics. How can you blame that? Therefore, they are spending these vast sums in the hope of garnering the marginal vote. Because that 1,000 votes extra is the determinant of victory or defeat. And happily, it does not require a constitutional change to switch over to a proportionality model. All it means is a multi-member constituency model with a proportionality-based system. And you know some more than anybody else, the first 2 parliaments were elected in multi-member constituencies. There was no reservation of constituencies for SCs and STs in the first 2 parliaments in 52 and 57. Only because in one particular seat, Mr. V.V. Giri was unelected. He was not elected because he came number 2. The first seat was open in that seat because of a local quirk, a scheduled tribe, but a Raja scheduled tribe was elected. The second seat was reserved to a scheduled tribe. Both seats went to scheduled tribe. The parliament panicked instead of finding a rational solution. Therefore, they started reserving constituencies since 1962 onwards. We could do it through a normal law. The constitution makers were very wise. They very carefully crafted the constitution to give us space to have a multi-member proportionate representation system. There's no reason to have this kind of a first past the post system. It is merely by Representation of the People Act. Today, I believe the sickening feeling that many people get out of the first past the post system and the coalition governments and the corruption, and of course the no's for vote, whatever. This gives us tremendous opportunity. Post 2009, there is tremendous fear. of even more fractured coalition. The unspoken fear in the country is